And welcome to the presentation on Who's Cheering You On, Understanding Your Child's Behavior. My name is Alysha Kim, and I will be your presenter today. So today, we're going to be talking about behavior. The main areas we're going to cover include discussing adaptive and challenging behaviors, the ABCs of behavior, the functions of behavior, and antecedent strategies that can be utilized to address behavior. So when we talk about behavior, we're typically talking about one of two types of behavior. First, there is adaptive behavior, which we want to increase. And second, there's challenging behavior that we want to decrease. Adaptive behavior is a collection of conceptual, social, and practical skills that all people learn in order to function in their daily lives. Examples of adaptive behavior might include basic functional communication skills, daily living skills such as brushing your teeth, telling time, counting money, riding the bus, as well as social skills like sharing or taking turns with others. When we talk about challenging behavior, we are referring to behavior that interferes with a person's daily living activities or their ability to adapt to and participate in particular settings. Challenging behavior might also sometimes be referred to as maladaptive behavior or even aberrant behavior. However, these references are becoming more common in clinic and research-based settings. Examples of challenging behavior might include crying or tantrum behaviors, elopement or running away, aggression, property destruction, or self-injurious behaviors such as head hitting or biting oneself. However, this being said, I think the main takeaway that I would like for you to gain is that all behavior is a form of communication. Behaviors, good or bad, are ways for people to express their wants or needs or how they are feeling. Specifically, challenging behaviors are an indicator that someone does not have the current skills to appropriately communicate that something might be wrong or have the ability to express their dissatisfaction with something. So when this is the case, how can you interpret what these challenging behaviors might be telling you and help you better understand what your child might be trying to tell you? Well, the first step is to remember your ABCs of behavior. The ABCs of behavior will help you to understand what comes before and after the behavior you're looking at. The A in ABC stands for antecedent. The antecedent is what happens right before the behavior and is commonly called what's known as a trigger. The B in ABC stands for the behavior you're looking at, which is defined as any observable and measurable action. So basically, it's what a person says or what a person does. And finally, the C in ABC stands for consequence, which is what happens right after the behavior. The consequence often determines the likelihood the behavior will occur again. So for example, if something reinforcing or pleasant occurs after a behavior, then the likelihood of that behavior occurring again under similar contexts will increase because the individual has learned that something positive will happen if they engage in that specific behavior. So you might be asking, why is understanding the ABCs of behavior important? Well, the information gathered when looking at the ABCs of behavior will help you to determine why the behavior might be occurring. To better understand the why, we will want to take our ABC data and translate it into a functional hypothesis. So to do this, I want you to remember WTF. Now, in different circumstances, especially since we are talking about behavior, WTF might mean something a little bit different to you. However, for today's presentation, WTF stands for what's the function? It's important for us to identify the function of a challenging behavior because it helps to understand why your child is engaging in the challenging behavior, as well as to help you better select appropriate interventions and supports that you can provide in order to prevent or also decrease the challenging behavior. So there are four main functions of behavior. These four include sensory maintained behavior, escape or avoidance maintained behavior, attention maintained behavior, and tangible maintained behavior. To better remember these four functions, I like to think about taking a seat, or SEAT. Sensory maintained behaviors are behaviors that are reinforced by either increasing or decreasing internal sensory stimulation. These behaviors can occur anytime, but may increase when your child is either anxious, excited, or overwhelmed, and typically occurs because it feels good or it removes an unwanted internal feeling. Typically, children who are hypersensitive or overly sensitive to stimuli may engage in sensory maintained behaviors because they want to reduce their current level of stimulation. They may perceive the surrounding environment as too overstimulating, such as it's too loud or too bright, or there's too many people around and they feel overwhelmed. These behaviors often provide a calming or a soothing effect that alleviate that overstimulation. Children, on the other hand, who are hyposensitive or under-responsive to stimuli may engage in sensory maintained behaviors because they want to increase their current level of stimulation. The surrounding environment may not be engaging or highly preferred, which may then lead the child to engage in self-stimulating behaviors because it feels good or because it keeps them occupied. There's many different types of sensory maintained behaviors, and the following are some examples. So you might see some visual related behaviors, such as staring at lights, repetitive blinking, moving fingers in front of their eyes, hand flapping, peering out of the corners of eyes, or repeatedly lining up objects. You also have vestibular related behaviors, such as rocking back and forth, rocking side to side, spinning around, jumping, or pacing back and forth. You could also see auditory related behaviors, such as vocalizations like humming, grunting, or high-pitched shrieking, tapping ears or objects, covering and uncovering ears, snapping fingers, clapping hands, repeating lines from videos, books, or songs. There's also smell-related behaviors, which are sniffing or smelling people or different items or objects that are around. There's also tactile-related behavior, which includes scratching or rubbing the skin with hands or with another object, opening and closing fists, tapping surfaces with fingers, things that provide a tactile response. And lastly, there's also taste-related behaviors, which might include placing body parts or different items or objects in their mouth, or also licking different types of objects. The second function of behavior in our Take a Seat acronym is escape or avoidance maintained behaviors, which are behaviors that are reinforced by escaping or avoiding unwanted interactions, activities, or situations. These behaviors typically occur when an interaction, activity, or situation is maybe too hard, non-preferred, or even aversive because your child is able to actively escape or avoid having to participate in those situations. Examples of escape or avoidance maintained behaviors might include property destruction, elopement, or refusal to participate in an activity. The third function in our SEAT acronym is attention maintained behaviors. These are behaviors that are reinforced by receiving some sort of attention from others and occurs because your child may want a reaction or a response from somebody, be it either good or bad attention. Examples of attention maintained behaviors may include crying, elopement, swearing, or saying inappropriate things, or even aggression towards others. And lastly, the final function in our SEAT acronym includes tangible maintained behaviors, which are behaviors that are reinforced by receiving access to desired items or actions because your child wants access to something they want. The behavior occurs because it provides your child with the item or action that they are trying to get in touch with. Again, examples of tangible maintained behavior include aggression, crying or tantrum behavior, screaming, or forcefully grabbing items from either somebody or someplace. So now that I've thrown all of these acronyms at you, I would like you to say your ABCs, tell yourself WTF, and take a seat because here we go. I'm going to throw one more at you. The last acronym I want to talk about is the FBI. Now, not the scary FBI, but in this case, function-based intervention. So now that you know about the ABCs and functions of behavior, you'll want to utilize function-based interventions to address those challenging behaviors that we talked about. This includes teaching and reinforcing a replacement behavior that serves the same function as the challenging behavior in order to decrease that challenging behavior and increase the appropriate replacement behavior. So to help you identify what function-based intervention might be helpful to address your child's challenging behavior, you should ask yourself two questions. The first question is, can your child perform the replacement behavior? It's important to determine whether your child can't engage in the replacement behavior or if they simply won't engage in the behavior. If they can't, then this is a skill deficit that needs to be taught. If they won't, then this is more of a motivation issue, and we need to figure out how to reinforce engaging in the replacement behavior. The second question you want to ask is if there's anything you can change in the surrounding environment to basically set the stage for the replacement behavior to occur. These include factors that might act as a trigger for the problem behavior or that might promote the replacement behavior altogether. Examples of this might be a visual schedule to show your child what to expect throughout their day, or putting pictures in plain sight to prompt appropriate communication. And this is where antecedent interventions come into play. Antecedent interventions help to reduce the probability that challenging behavior will occur by eliminating the triggers for that challenging behavior, by modifying the antecedent event, by changing how antecedent events are presented, and by teaching and reinforcing the appropriate replacement behavior. So a really common antecedent-based intervention includes functional communication training. Again, going back to the bigger theme of this presentation, all behavior is a form of communication. And so we want to make sure that we're actively teaching how to appropriately communicate. And this includes functional communication training. Functional communication training teaches and establishes a functionally equivalent replacement behavior for the challenging behaviors so that your child can appropriately communicate their wants and their needs. Oftentimes, this occurs by contriving opportunities to practice appropriate requesting and to be sure that behaviors and appropriate communication are reinforced frequently. Just a reminder also that communication can be vocal or non-vocal. So a lot of times when people think of communication, they think of actual vocal speaking and vocal communication. However, communication can also be in various different modes, such as through pictures or a device, or even written. So those are all things to also take into consideration when we're talking about communication. So some examples of what functional communication as a replacement behavior might look like based on the function of the behavior you're looking at might include if you are dealing with a sensory maintained behavior, then you're going to want to teach your child how to ask for that sensory input. So how to appropriately ask for hugs or how to appropriately ask for squeezes, things like that. So that way they can appropriately gain access to that sensory input. You might also want to teach your child how to ask for help or a break or to indicate that they're all done with a specific task if they are engaging in escape or avoidance maintained behaviors. When it comes to attention maintained behaviors, you're going to want to teach your child how to appropriately ask for that interaction or initiate that interaction. So a lot of times that comes into play when we talk about social skills building and how to appropriately gain somebody's attention or to ask somebody to play or to initiate a conversation. And lastly, when we are looking at tangible maintained behaviors, you're going to want to teach your child how to appropriately ask for that item or that object that they are wanting to get. Another example of an antecedent-based intervention that is also quite common are the utilization of visual supports. Now, visual supports makes auditory information visual. And this is really helpful when you're trying to take more abstract concepts and turn them into more concrete concepts. So things like time. Time is a very abstract thing, but if you can put that into visual terms to outline what that event or that opportunity is that you're talking about, then it helps to make that a little bit more concrete for somebody. Visual supports supplement verbal instruction to increase comprehension because sometimes a lot of words can be very overwhelming, but by pairing minimal words with pictures, it can help that comprehension occur a little bit easier. Visual supports also helps to promote independence, and it also presents a clear representation of what to expect. Examples of visual supports can be pictures, it can be drawings, it can be a written list, it can be a calendar, things like that. You know I use visual supports on my every day-to-day basis. Without my planner, I think I would be lost. It helps me organize my thoughts in my day and helps me see exactly what I'm to expect throughout my day. So similarly, this is where when we talk about visual supports that could come into play. So visual supports can be used to visually organize a sequence of events to assist in understanding and anticipating the order and or all the different details of that event. It can also help to cue a response. So rather than having to verbally or physically prompt somebody to respond to you, you can use a visual to help cue that response. And it can also be used to help to facilitate communication. These are just a couple examples of what visual supports might look like. You can see there's a visual schedule, even a first then a visual, as well as just some visuals that indicate appropriate social cues. So similar to visual supports, another antecedent-based intervention can also be the utilization of social stories. Social stories provide information in a concrete and literal manner to increase understanding of an abstract or difficult concept. A social story will answer the who, what, when, where, and why of a social situation. And it's important to try to personalize the story to your child and to the context in which you're trying to teach them. So a lot of times social stories can be used to teach how to make friends or how to engage in a conversation. Or sometimes it can even be used during transitional periods or events, such as what to expect when I go to a new school, or what to expect when I go to the doctor, things like that, to basically just help set the stage and help the individual reading the social story understand what's going to happen. And also the things that they need to do in order for that event to occur. So similarly, social stories can be used to help someone understand how others might behave or respond in a particular situation. So this might be related to perspective taking. It can also be used to teach a new skill, as well as help somebody cope with changes in a routine or unexpected or distressing events, as well as teaching socially appropriate behaviors. Social stories are typically made up of four different components. The first component is what's called the descriptive sentence, which answers the different WH questions of the situation. So again, the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. The perspective sentences includes feelings or opinions related to the situation. So, if I do this, it makes my mom happy. Or when I do this, I um, will be able to make friends. The third part are your directive sentences. So this is what states what the desired behavior is and what should be done. So this is really where we're talking about the skill acquisition and the teaching of what the skill is that you are trying to target in the story. And then lastly, there are the control sentences, which identifies how to remember the strategies in the story. So just like how I kind of provided you guys some acronyms, similarly in a social story, you would want to provide some way for your child to remember these are the things that I need to do when I'm in these situations. Or, oh, remember, look at my visual schedule, or this is the acronym that I can remember when I want to make or engage in a conversation with somebody else. And this is just a couple examples of what a social story could be. And as you can see in the social story on the left, the child that actually the social story was designed for participated in the development of that social story and actually drew pictures that related to what the context of each page was. And that kind of, gets their buy-in and helps them also comprehend a little bit more of what is in that story. Another example of an antecedent-based intervention could be what's called behavioral momentum. And to do this, you're basically going to present several easy tasks in quick succession before presenting a difficult task. The small reinforcement provided for engaging in the easy, high probability behavior will then increase the likelihood that your child will engage in the difficult or low probability behavior. So this is most effective when a demand is placed and the challenging behavior is escape or avoidance maintained. So for example, this might be when a transition is presented, there's a change in routine or expectation occurs, or a non-preferred or difficult task is given. So an example could be if you know your child really doesn't like answering math questions, you might want to, before you ask them what's 2 + 2, say, hey, touch your nose. Hey, give me high five. Hey, touch your feet. Hey, what is 2 + 2? So you are actively, before you're providing the or the question that you know your child is not going to want to really answer, you're providing a series of easier questions that you are providing praise and positive feedback to before you ask that tough question, which will then in turn increase the likelihood that they'll respond because they just answered 3 really easy questions and received praise and reinforcement for that. So they will more likely be able to answer what that 2 + 2 question is. So just some other general tips and reminders when talking about antecedent-based interventions. It's important to break down larger tasks into smaller, more manageable tasks. So if you know, even say, for example, doing homework, like doing homework in general might be a huge task within itself. So you might want to look and break that down into, okay, the first task is really, we're just going to finish this one worksheet. And then the second task is, okay, we're going to read for 15 minutes. And then the third task is going to be, finishing this other worksheet. So by breaking it down and providing intermittent breaks in between those and reinforcing the completion of each individual task, the likelihood that you're going to get the larger task of finishing homework done is going to increase. You might also want to consider interspersing preferred and non-preferred activities throughout the day. So that way it's not just, non-preferred after non-preferred after non-preferred activity back to back, because as time goes on, the likelihood that your child will participate or want to engage in that activity will decrease. Another helpful tip that I always have to remind myself is to tell your child what to do instead of what not to do. So you're always going to want to try to frame things in the positive rather than the negative. So rather than saying, don't run or stop running, you might want to say, please walk or please go slowly through the hall, whatever that might be. You might also want to use minimal words when giving directions or placing demands. So that way you are clear and straight to the point. So that way all these words aren't mumbling what it is you are trying to convey to your child. So other tips that you might want to consider is to provide choices when you can. So rather than asking open-ended questions or just saying, hey, what do you want? It's always a good option to provide various choices. So you can say, do you want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or do you want chicken nuggets for dinner? Rather than just saying, hey, what do you want for dinner? Because the response you might get might be varied. You might not get a response. You might just say, I don't know, whatever. But if you want an actual response, you might want to consider providing choices. You'll also want to make sure that the replacement behavior you are teaching is functionally equivalent to the challenging behavior. So for example, if you are trying to address a behavior that is attention maintained, you'll want to make sure that the replacement behavior you're trying to teach is addressing that social attention component. You'll also want to be sure to contrive opportunities to practice in engaging in those replacement behaviors you're trying to teach frequently throughout the day. So that way you're helping to generalize those skills and that behavior across different settings, different people, different situations. And lastly, kind of the big picture of this presentation is just to remember that all behavior is a form of communication. So even though in those situations when you're dealing with challenging behaviors, it can be stressful, it can be difficult, but remember that that is your child's way of trying to tell you something and trying to tell you that they're not okay, or that they need help. And that's where some of these tools hopefully will help you navigate through that. And lastly, one of the big takeaways as well that I want you to hopefully gain from this is to have grace with yourself. I love this quote of just do what you can with what you have where you are, because nobody's perfect. No situation is perfect. We're never going to have a perfectly contrived situation in which we can help address these challenging behaviors, maybe outside of the clinic setting. So, give yourself that grace and that leeway to say, hey, mistakes are going to happen and that's okay because tomorrow's another day. So don't stress, just do your best and forget the rest. So thank you. Again, my name is Alysha Kim. If you have any questions following this presentation, please feel free. You can email me here at alisha.kim@k12.hi.us. But if not, I hope you gained something from this presentation and thank you for your time.